So good morning. Welcome to discussion on ethics paper 2018. So the paper was concluded very recently, and it will be very interesting to point out that this is a unique paper. In fact, from 2013 onwards, ethics is a unique paper introduced to assess the personality of the candidates. This is adding a new dimension that administration should be with the human face. From that point of view, this paper is introduced. If you can see the paper from the many years, from 2013 to 2018, from the last 6 years, out of the 250 marks, the paper is divided into section A and section B. Section A contains 12 to 13 questions carrying almost 125, 20 or 130, basing on the number of questions. And for section B, constantly there are 6 case studies given every year, and no change at all. The first one is to assess the ethical understanding of the subject. The second is the practical way of assessing the candidate's understanding. So this is very interesting to see. Compared to last 5 years, this year it is unique in the sense that earlier the number is given in such a way that we used to get around 14 questions. But this time this is now reduced to 12 questions. But every question up to 6, it contains more than 2, A, B. In the case of 6th question, A, B, C. So total 13 questions carrying 10 marks each. Candidates has to write 150 words for each question. In the case of the case studies, the number of words is 250 and the marks are 20. So this is the way how the paper has been maintained the same, not a big difference as seen from this pattern. But in this case, in this year, 2 things we can obviously see these things. One is about the quotations. The quotations given this year are many compared to last so many years. It happened in the first year, 2013, where we got 5 quotations, but this year we got 6 quotations out of the 13 questions. That means proportionate to 45% of the paper is dependent on the quotations. For example, the question 3B by Warren Buffett quote, and the question number 4 is again a quotation. And question number 4B appears to be a normal question, but it is about the ends and means, the importance of this thing. We can treat it as a quotation. And in the case of question number 6, A, that's called from Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi, Tirukkural. So clearly we got 6 quotations, and in the case of the Right Information Act is not about citizens' empowerment alone. It essentially redefines the concept of accountability. This is from objectives of the RTI. If this is also taken, the number goes to 7, of course. But even if we take only 6, the number itself is very high as far as the quotations are concerned. And another important factor is that ethics paper contains mostly on the concepts. And in the case of question number 1A and B, this is about the concepts. Question 1A, though they have not clearly given the type of concepts, but we can easily bring out certain concepts which are foundational values for administration. And in the case of 1B, Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct, and 2A, Public Interest, B, Right to Information Act, and 3A, Conflict of Interest, and B, 3B, it talks about integrity, intelligence, and energy. That way, we can find lots of concepts, the ethical dilemma or the ends and means. These are all very important concepts. Unless the students are not clear about the concepts, they cannot write this paper, and it's not easy to score more marks. Normally, from the last some years, what we have observing that the marks from the ethics are coming down. It's very tough to score even 90 plus in the ethics paper. The reason is, though students have been scoring very high marks in paper 1 and paper 3, but they are finding it very difficult to score more in the case of ethics paper. The reason is that this is a practical paper, and unless the student, the candidate develops a good personality and makes it as a practice, it is not easy to write very convincing answers and score high marks. So from this point of view, this paper is really bringing the personality of the candidate. But this year, what I have observed is, now it is tilted more on the values and ethics in public administration and the probity in governance. These two chapters were heavily leaned upon compared to other things, though other things are also moderately covered, but it's now just tilted towards that. So having said these things, let us go for part A, that's called section A of the ethics paper. How the answer can be written for this. The first question is, state the three basic values, universal in nature, in the context of civil services, and bring out their importance, 150 words. Now they are not asking specifically what the concepts or the values they want, but they are asking you, they are giving you an option to you to bring out those things. For an administrator, the most important value, universal in nature, is the integrity. Integrity is very important, and you have to define integrity very briefly. Like integrity is the inner sense of wholeness deriving from qualities such as honesty and consistency of character. Now, why it is important for administration? It curtails the tendencies of intellectual perversion. There are so many other reasons, but you can give one reason as to why integrity is important for us. The second is the impartiality. Impartiality for an administrator is another important crucial value, which is an appeal to the universal in nature. Now, what is impartiality? Impartiality means acting solely to the means of the case and without fear or favor. So, this is important. Public servants should not be carried away by his likes or dislikes and should be impartial to avoid corruption or favoritism. So, you can give any reasons, but this is one of the best reasons why we must have this. The third basic value, universal nature, is compassion. What's compassion? Compassion is sensitivity to the distress of self and others with a commitment, try to do something about it to prevent it. So here, this emanates from the awareness of the feelings of others, and it compels to pay attention towards others. So the bureaucrats should be very, very considerate towards other people. So this is a very brief description about the three values universal in nature. Now let's move on to the second question, that is called 1B. 1B is about the code of ethics and the code of conduct with the suitable examples. Code of ethics and code of conduct. What is code of ethics? Code of ethics applies to culture, education, and religion of a whole society. It talks about what to do, what not to do. The do's and don'ts are given in codes of ethics. Whereas code of conduct generally it covers an individual's official or professional conduct where he is bound by the conduct rules or the code of conduct. If it is violated, then there is a punishment so they're called enforceable. So if you can see the difference between those two, code of ethics is generally voluntary and not enforceable, whereas violation of code of conduct is acted upon by the Department of Personnel, and in the corporates also the code of conduct is very important. So this is the difference between these two, and the codes of ethics is not formulated as far as the bureaucracy is concerned, but they are bound by the Nolan Committee recommendations. However, we got the codes of conduct and the codes of ethics, and the code of conduct is well done by the conduct rules, and there are many restrictions imposed on the bureaucrats. If they are violated, then there is a punishment following by a proper inquiry. So, code of ethics and code of conduct are very essential for smooth administration and for delivering the services to the society. So, now coming to the second question, 2A. 2I says, what is meant by public interest? What are the principles and procedures to be followed by the civil servants in public interest? Now here, he talks about the public interest and the principles and procedures to be followed by the civil servants in public interest. Now here, what is public interest? It can be very briefly defined like this. Public interest is the welfare or well-being of the general public. So, while discharging the duty, the civil servant should maintain that the interest of the public is more important than himself. It is against the self-interest. So, a bureaucrat is a public servant and he must think about the welfare and well-being of the public. Now, the principles and procedures, they are well laid down, and it is summed up by in the report in the second ARC. Second ARC states like this. So it was given that he has to maintain integrity. Civil servants should be guided solely by public interest in their official decision making. So while taking any decision, their consent should to take public interest into consideration, not any other consideration. The second is, as we have discussed, the impartiality should take decisions based on merit alone, not by the personal prejudices, likes or dislikes. The third is the commitment to public service. Delivered services in a fair, effective, impartial, and courteous manner. So this is the commitment, total commitment to public service. The fourth one is accountability. Owning accountability for decisions and to subject to scrutiny. He cannot escape the responsibility for the decisions what he has taken. So accountability is the very important component in the present thinking process of the administration. The fifth one is the devotion to duty. So devotion to duty, absolute and unstinting devotion towards their duties at all times. So the total undivided attention is to be paid to the administration. And the last one, we can say is the exemplary behavior. He must lead from the front. That is the main principle of any administrator. So treat all members of the public with respect and courtesy. So respect and courtesy, and uphold the rich traditions of the civil services. So the leadership qualities are very important, and these qualities are to be maintained in the public interest. So a bureaucrat is bound by the legacy of the bureaucrats, the ex-bureaucrats who are great people in their own way. Now let's move on to the 2B. It says the Right to Information Act is not all about citizens' empowerment alone. It essentially redefines the concept of accountability. Discuss. So we see why it is so important from both. It is giving empowerment to the citizens, and at the same time it also redefines the concept of accountability. That means the people who take the decisions are responsible, answerable, or they can be asked as to why these decisions were taken, and they can be punished if they are not in the interest of the public. So this is a very important function of the RTI. So the intention and the basic objective of RTI is two points. So let us take what is this. According to RTI Act, the basic objective of the Right to Information Act is to empower the citizens, promote transparency and accountability in the working of the government. So in the objective, it is very clearly laid down. It is to empower the citizens, and at the same time promote transparency in the administration, and at the same time accountability in the working of the government. So the government servants should be made accountable. When the information is accessed by the public servants will be very careful while taking a decision. So it definitely enhances the accountability. An informed citizen is better equipped to keep necessary vigil on the instruments of governance and make the government more accountable to the governed. So these are the objectives of RTI. Now let us see how it encourages the accountability from the bureaucrats. So the main features of the RTI Act, if you can see this thing, the Information Act of 2005 empowers every citizen to ask any question from government or seek any information, take copies of any government documents, inspect any government document, inspect any government work, take samples of materials of any government work. So from this point of view, the good outcome of the RTI Act. So this has attested that it is now ensuring the accountability from the public, from the government servants. So many scams have been exposed to RTI applications, and now people are thinking twice to take any decision which is going against the interest of the public. The RTI Act has helped to hold officials accountable for any deficiency in their duties. This is another important aspect. One is empowerment of the citizen. They can get the information, they can demand it. It's obligatory on the part of the government to give the information which is in the public interest. The second is the accountability factor. This is also a very important aspect. For example, if you can see an RTI application of Badresh Wamja from a village in Gujarat. So this boy asked for the information as to how the Tahsildars are supplying the goods to the people on the ration cards, why they are not delivering in time. So this made the Secretary of the Food and Civil Supplies to take action against the concerned tahsildars who are not discharging their duties. Thereby, it is ensuring the answerability, the accountability from the bureaucrats. So, it is the twin objectives of RTI. Number one is to empower the citizens. Number two, making the officials accountable for their actions. Let's go to 3A. What is meant by public interest? What are the principles and procedures to be followed by civil servants in public interest? Okay, this is about third is, what's meant by conflict of interest? That's called conflict of interest. Illustrate with examples the difference between the actual and potential conflicts of interest. Conflict of interest occurs when a official's private interests are such that they may influence the performance of his or her public duties. So, first slightly you can define what is public interest. So, conflict of interest occurs when a public official's private interests are such that they may influence the performance of his or her public duties. Conflict of interest arises. How does it arise? It arises on different situations. Now, we can take a couple of examples here. Number one, self-dealing. Self-dealing, this is one of the most obvious one. This occurs when an individual's activities in his or her official capacity involve dealing with him, herself in a private capacity, often for personal benefit. For example, a public official using his or her office to hire their own private company to work for the government. So, he may be having a company or his friends that may not be disclosed to the government. So, whenever he wants some work to be done, he can hire from his own company, and it comes in the what we can call the conflict of interest. The second is about the dealing with close members. So, when public officials deal with persons with whom they have close relations, such as the family members, close friends and business partners. So, sometimes their kith and kin relatives, they may be having the companies and they can acquire the goods and services from the company for the government. In that case also, the conflict of interest arises. So, this is happening mostly in the case of the politicians who are becoming, the people who are dealing in certain services, like the practicing lawyers, the doctors, and some the contractors. They are coming to the politics, and when they become the sources of power, like the ministers, when they become the ministers, they are likely to influence the decisions of the government in favor of their firms or to their trade. So, there this conflict of interest arises. Hence, strict guidelines are needed. They are not strictly followed. So, they are needed today for dealing with the conflict of interest. Let's go to a question. This is a very interesting question. It's a quotation, in fact, by Warren Buffett. And looking for people to hire, we look for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they do not have the first, the other two will kill you. So, very interesting. And it will be very interesting to note that such a question was given in 2014. In 2014, they asked this in a different fashion, but the essence of this thing is the same. It was asked in 3A 2014, integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, but knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. What do you understand by this statement? Explain your stand with illustrations from the modern context. Now here he asks about the quote, and looking for people to higher qualities. Again, he talks about integrity, intelligence, and the energy. While dealing this question, because it is being repeated, that means UPSC wants that people should understand the difference between the integrity and his intelligence. This is being given in a different connotation by Stephen R. Covey. Stephen R. Covey, in his 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People, talks about the statement brings out the difference, importance of competence and character. He talks about competence and character. Here, the intelligence can be equated with competence, and the integrity is the most important part of the character. So, what's more important for administration? Both are equally important, no doubt, but as pointed out by Mr. Covey as well as Mr. Buffett, the most important factor is not mere intelligence, not mere intelligence. It should be supported more by the character. So while character without competence does not serve any purpose and useless, that is called integrity without competence as useless and may not be that much worthy, but competence without character is counterproductive and dangerous. That's definitely because the people who got more knowledge, they may be sometimes perverted and use that knowledge against the very organization, and the people who got good character, though they may not be that much competent, but they are not dangerous. But the point here is, we must think about whom to hire. Definitely we go for people who are very highly competent, but while seeing the competence, but we must also pay attention towards whether they are character oriented or not. This is a very crucial aspect, what Covey has emphasized, what Buffett has emphasized, and what UPSC is also emphasizing. It shows that UPSC wants more of people of character. It's not mere robots with knowledge, but human beings with human qualities, with competence. That's what UPSC wants. So, while both of them are essential for a productive purpose, lack of character is something that is worse than competence. So, this statement can be testified from so many types of competent professionals in the society. We have seen doctors who is good, but is not capable of conducting a surgery, is no use. But as a doctor is competent but characterless, is dangerous as he commercially exploit the profession and plays with the lives of many people. So from this point of view, it's not only the doctors, the lawyers, but the bureaucrats are also, there should be character oriented. So people with character, even though not competent, may be useless to others, but people of competence without character are dangerous to the entire society, because they are capable to manipulate the institutions for their selfish end. So from this point of view, Warren Buffett cautioned that while recruiting a new person, we must see not only the competence of the person, but we must see the character of the person. Other important area is doing a thing, everything is permitted which is not prohibited expressly or by clear implication. Examine the statement with the suitable examples in the context of public servant discharging his oblique her duties. The question here is, in doing a good thing, a bureaucrat is supposed to do the good things because he is bound by the law, and 95% of the time the law is good. So he is bound by the law. Sometimes law may not define, or sometimes law may come in the way to discharge his duties also. So there what he has to follow? That's the question here we have to discuss. Every civil servant is bound by the law enacted by the state, but the law sometimes may not cover the right things which are required for the good of the people. Sometimes in the normal course also laws may come in the way of doing good. For example, breaking traffic rules if there is a signal help to help an accident patient to save his life. It come in the way of discharging and doing good to the patient. Sometimes it so happens that law may not cover the duties which are to be discharged by the bureaucrats. In such a situation, the bureaucrat has to be guided by not only the law in letter, but the law in spirit. So, the law, that means you must understand not only the letter of the law, but also the spirit of the law, and you must act accordingly. Sometimes the law may not bring all the areas. So, from this point of view, for example, bureaucrats can take action based on his conscience and also involve the citizens in many activities. So, normally we think that by going by conscience, we are violating the law. But sometimes the law may not cover all aspects, and there the bureaucrat should go by the conscience and he must discharge his duties. And at the same time, sometimes we have to interpret the law in such a way, because it's not limiting. We can interpret it in a right way, in an ethical way, to discharge the duties in the society. So this is the scope which the bureaucrat should always take into consideration, not restrict to the letter of the law, but he must go to the spirit of the law, that is the spirit of this question. The question 4b, with regard to morality of actions, with regard to morality of actions, one view is that means are of paramount importance, and the other view is that the ends justify the means. Which view do you think is more appropriate? Justify your answer. This is all very interesting aspect, and in the present circumstances, people give importance to the ends, not the means to reach the end. So this is what is being asked in this question. So when people are accustomed for short-term gains, the support, the end justifies the means. But people aim at long-term goals, insist the purity of means, as wisdom denotes the pursuing of the best ends through the best means. If a politician, for example, a politician by employing foul means becomes a minister, if he becomes the minister, we cannot expect that he or she turns out to be a benefactor to the society. This may happen in the films, so the filmy stories are unlikely to be realized in real life. So we heard about Robin Hood, a hero who robs the Peter and pays the Paul, appears to be romantic from distance, but he cannot establish his credibility even to himself. How this man can answer his conscience? That's more important. He is killing somebody, robbing somebody, and giving to the poor people. End is good, but the means, that's very important. So the very employment of bad means indicates the something of a conscience which alone is sufficient to destroy all goodness in life. So people are answerable to their conscience, and the conscience definitely pricks and questions as to why the means are being employed. So in view of the above, that means because of that type of conscience pricking, so you must think about that whether means are important or end is important. So accept the view that means are of paramount importance in achieving any end in our life. So good end should be reached by good means. Short term, yes, we may feel happy because whatever means we are adopting is delivering the goods. But in the long run, long term, we have to think about it. It's not fair to employ foul means. In 5A, the question is, suppose the government of India is thinking of constructing a dam in mountain valley bounded by forests and inhabited by ethnic communities. What rational policy should it resort to in dealing with unforeseen contingencies? This question is more of a general studies in nature uh, because this is fact oriented mostly. So, how to deal such questions? So, this is related to the development and environment. So, whether development can be taken at the cost of environment, or should we give only importance to environment without thinking about the development? So, this ethical dilemma aspect is being questioned here, and this can be answered from this point of view. So the issue of development versus environment is gaining importance due to the disasters took place in Uttarakhand, recently in Kerala and the northeast states. So having witnessing all these things, people are so scary about taking any projects in such environmentally sensitive zones. So many studies were conducted by Madhav Gadgil, Kasturi Rangan, as to what to do while taking any developmental activities like rehabilitation of people, constructing dams, or mining in environmentally sensitive regions like hill valleys. They gave a lot of suggestions in this respect. So this should be followed very strictly. To make more specific, we can say that in the ecologically sensitive zone, as recommended by Gadgil committee, fresh hydel projects should not be initiated. So better not to go for hydel projects in a large scale on the valleys. Even if the projects need to be taken inevitably, there should be thermal power. There should not be thermal power plants, but hydropower, and that too not. This should be micro, but not macro in nature. So, hydel power, that's called the thermal, no, hydro, okay, but not that's called not macro, but micro projects can be taken here. So steps should be taken for a complete ban on mining. So as recommended by Kasturi Rangan committee, the mining should be banned there, and the quarrying, sand mining in the that's called ecologically sensitive areas, it should not be encouraged. The ESA should be administered by a statutory authority with the active participation of the Gram Panchayats and local authorities. This is another important aspect because the local people should be involved in such projects, and that will definitely help as to whether a particular thing is now giving any benefit to the local people or not. 5B. The 5B talks about explain the process of resolving ethical dilemmas in public administration. In the entire ethics paper, the ethical dilemmas, resolving the ethical dilemmas is very, very crucial. Ethical dilemmas are situations in which decisions are involved in conflicts between two or more principles. In other words, it is taking decisions between good versus good. Ethical concerns are different, ethical dilemmas are different. In the case of ethical concerns, it is the decision between good versus bad. But in the case of ethical dilemmas, decisions are taken between good versus good, right versus right. So this is a very crucial aspect. So we can spend a few more minutes here. Here the actions and the decisions are based on moral agent choice and volition, and which significantly affect other individuals. So ethical dilemmas arises in three situations. Number one is the prima facie principles. Prima facie principles are 6 in number, and any conflict in choosing among the 6 principles give rise to ethical dilemmas. For example, the 6 prima facie principles are honesty, promise keeping, not harming others, beneficence, autonomy, equality. That's called the justice. If a conflict arises among these 6 principles, then that principle which is giving more benefit to others, that is to be given importance. Normally, promise keeping, satyam, that is important. But while telling the truth, it may harm the interests of others. For example, a person who is telling others that an innocent person is hiding, the people who ask the information may be thieves, maybe thuggies. They may kill the person and take away the property. In such a situation, by telling the truth or safeguarding the person, what is to be done here? So that is the dilemma one has to resolve. For example, at the middle of the night, you are standing in a bus stop and the girl is running and she is being chased by some people. The girl runs in one direction, but these people came and ask you where the girl has gone. But if you say a different direction, then can we call him as a violator of the truth? Yes, he may violate the truth, but he's saving the honor of a girl. So in such a situation, as per the prima facie principles, we can go by beneficence. We may violate the principle called promise keeping. So this is one area where the ethical dilemma can be resolved. The second is when a single principle is involved. When a single principle is involved, ethical dilemmas can arise even when a single principle is involved. For example, a person, a bureaucrat, so she reaches the scene of bad accident. 2 persons are badly hurt. They need immediate attention because both got injured, and she can save only one person. Whom can she save? The accident is grave. Both are received almost the same type of injuries. So whom to save? It is a dilemma for her to resolve. Again, she can solve this basing on the factors, contributory factors of the patients or the persons involved in the accident. The person, between 2 persons, one person may be a very good prominent contributor in the arts or maybe in the economic activities. The other person may be a very ordinary person. In such a situation, whom to save? So it depends on how she is giving importance to, and this is very difficult to resolve. The third one is, here the principle of beneficence applies to both victims of the accident. It enjoins duty upon surrogate to help both of them. But she can help only one survivor. In this situation, beneficence conflicts with itself, and it's very difficult to take the decision. There is another aspect called intractable dilemmas. In intractable dilemmas where you cannot immediately come out with a cause. So, in such a situation, the ethical doctrines need be used to resolve conflicts between moral criteria. This is the domain of normative ethics. So, the ethical theories like the utilitarianism, deontological theories, so you can apply these theories and resolve the ethical dilemmas. So, in the administration, the most crucial aspect to the administrator is not to take a decision between good and bad. Any person can take good decision leaving the bad. The most important crucial one is to decide between the good versus good. So this is called the ethical dilemma, and the ethical dilemmas arise sometimes in the life of the bureaucrats, and the greatness of the bureaucrat depends on how effectively take a decision on the ethical dilemmas. While resolving the ethical dilemmas, one thing determine whether the problem is ethical dilemma or not. So, is there a conflict between important moral standards in this case? Can the values in the conflict be identified straight away, or is it necessary to carry out further analysis to find them? Is it necessary to make a quantitative study to determine the values which need priority? These are all theoretical aspects, but the most important aspect is about the greater good to the greater number of people. That should be kept in mind while resolving the ethical dilemmas. Now the question is about the sixth question contains 3 quotations. What do each of the following quotations means to you in the present context? So the first one is about a quote from Abraham Lincoln. So this is a big quote. It takes more time to study and understand, but the essence is very simple. What it says is this: the true rule in determining to embrace or reject anything is not whether it has any evil in it, but whether it has more evil than good. There are few things wholly evil or wholly good. Almost everything, especially of government policy, is an inseparable compound of the two, so that our best judgments of the preponderance between them is continually demanded. So what do we understand by this? Especially for the administration point of view, we must understand the gist of this. So the statement denotes that every action contains good and bad. So everything has the both sides and pros and cons, and it cannot be judged completely as one-sided in many aspects. We cannot come to say that this is good, this is bad, this is white, this is black. It has its own pros and cons. So this is true especially by the actions taken by the government policies. Some of the government policies apparently appears to be tough to take, but they have to be taken. So the best example in the recent times is the GST policy of the taxation. So we have been implementing the GST, and there are many hiccups while implementing the GST policy. But the point is whether this policy is good for the country or not. When you look at the situation today, it is not being encouraged, but definitely this is a very important policy for taxation, because most of the countries all over the world, they have been following GST. So because we got because the system of implementation is cumbersome and not suitable to a country while illiteracy, connectivity is less, so the people find it a bad policy. But in the long term, we have to see the plus point. Then we can appreciate definitely that's good points. Like that, digitalization process, the digital aspect of the economy is also another important aspect. Immediately it is not giving good ground. People are being put to some type of hardship because the illiteracy is very, very high. But it's a good thing to see that the transparency of the economy is being maintained. So this statement gives an idea that every bureaucrat should stand by what he or she thinks is the ethical to the society and should be done whether people immediately understands the benefits or not. A bureaucrat should have a long-term perspective, is not playing to the gallery, and he must see what is good for the country like a doctor. A patient thinks that the doctor is giving an injection, but the injection is given to him in the good of the patient only. It is to be unkind to be kind. So you must always understand, immediately you find it's inconvenient and difficult, but in the long run, definitely the benefits will be very huge and the society will be benefited. So this is what is being asked in this quote. That's by Abraham Lincoln. Other aspect is anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. Anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. These are the words of Mahatma Gandhi. The two aspects, anger and intolerance, in absolute terms appears to be not correct. In the sense, anger and intolerance in the form of the rasas, the navarasas of Bharata is said kopa. That is one rasa, and the contempt, that is called the intolerance, nearer to the intolerance. These two rasas are very positive rasas because we cannot say any rasa is bad. The point here is, in absolute terms, we cannot treat them as negative rasas. But as Bapu has brought, we have to see them in the context. Contextually, when we see them, we must see that the anger of the people without any cause, anger which is not bridled, then that is bad. Even in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, Satyagraha, Agraha, anger, Satya, truth. So Satyagraha is important, Dharmagraha is important, so Agraha is important. But when the anger is not for the truth, not for the heroic deeds, by merely showing anger on the individuals, that is bad. And again, showing intolerance towards other human beings is bad. If you show anger towards a particular practice, particular deed, action, then anger may be good, may not be good. But anger is good when you are showing for a productive purpose. Anger is bad when you are showing against the individual, because action and individual both are different. So you show the anger on the action, not on the individual. This is what Gandhi wanted to emphasize here. So what is happening in the present society is that anger and intolerance is shown on the individuals. Some people are showing the anger on the dressing pattern, some people are showing anger on the food habits and the ideas and the religion. So this is what Gandhi has said is very bad. So it is not to show on the individuals and their living patterns. So anger and intolerance are enemies of correct understanding. If we are angry and if we are intolerant towards the ideas of others, we don't understand them perspectively. So what is important is we have to have an empathetic attitude towards others. We must think from others' point of view. This is what is called the synergization. We can see the best of both the sides and we can synergize. That's very, very important. So, dissension is the safety valve of democracy. This is very important. Why? If we are tolerant towards other people, then democracy survives. In fact, we have to respect the different opinions of others. In a divergent country like India, this type of tolerance and understanding is very important. So, anger and intolerance, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, incontextually are enemies for correct understanding. And coming to the last question for the discussion in the section A is that falsehood takes the place of truth when it results in unblemished common good. By Tirukural, this should be understood properly and it should be answered from the context of the question where the ends and means are concerned. The same question, the same paper, a question is given here, 4b, with regard to morality of actions. One view is that means are of paramount importance and the other view is that ends justify the means. Here we take the stand that means should be good apart from the good of the end. So ends and means should be good as per Mahatma Gandhi, and this is the correct stand. Once you take this stand, when it comes to the last question of Tirukural, where it is given, falsehood takes the place of truth when it results in unblemished common good. So here we should be consistent to the stand already we have taken. That's why we must be very clear as to whether we are supporting the quotation or we are seeing this quotation from contextually. That is very important. So the statement denotes that anything which contributes for the common good of the people is followed by them, even if it is fake and false, and over a period of time it takes the place of the truth. When people are doing certain practices which are not scientific, which are not on the sound thinking process, what happens is that becomes a common practice and this will be followed by others and it will be perpetuated over a period of time. Most of the rituals are being followed that way. So this observation appears to be true when most of the common people are succumbing to falling for such false signposts to be true. So certain signposts, false signposts, they are being treated as true and that is being followed by common people, and over a period of time the truth goes away and the falsehood remains. It is due to such beliefs that rulers like George Washington, who remarked that it is impossible to rule without God and Bible. So the question is, should we have the props of these things for ethical society? This is a very important aspect we must think about it. So the argument boils down to the true whether means are important or end is important. What's more important, whether we must go by the means or by the end? So for a short-sighted person, anything which delivers goods is right, but for a person like Gandhi with a long-term objective, anything which delivers goods is not right. So what's important? For the truth alone, truth alone should triumph and never resort to follow false means, even if it delivers the common good. So a bureaucrat should always remember that he cannot subscribe to false signposts of the life. He must emphasize the true means for a greater good. So the end should be reached by following good means, and the falsehood by any way should be removed by the truth. Truth alone should triumph. Satyameva Jayate. That is what we must have as the motto, as the policy of life. This is what we have to understand by the questions of the ethics paper. 13 questions were given, and here the time factor is very important, and we cannot have more time to discuss or maybe write in the examination, because you can take only 6.5 minutes, maximum 7 minutes to write this question. But the quality of the answer is very important, and give good examples, give good understanding of the subject, and it should show the maturity of your understanding. So this is all about the section A of ethics paper. Section B stands for the case studies, which are 6 in number, and this we can take as a part B of the discussion. Thank you very much.